Elmer Hall here, and this is a race. There's lots of ways to get from here to there, but this discussion about oil, the oil patch, sustainability, and looking for a goal in the future and ways from getting here to there is a real interesting lessons learned in the conundrum of oil and the contango that happened in April. So this is a little bit, it hits on a little bit of economics, a little bit of the dynamics of oil and the oil patch, and it then talks about how do we get from here to there? How do you play the aspects of oil and plan for the future so that you don't get into another conundrum like the one that happened in April? Basically, this is Elmer Hall, and we do the plans that every business needs. So in April, the third week is when options close, and the oil is traded in terms of options. So when you see the price of oil, it's actually talking about a futures contract for the next month. In April is when that third week of April is when that contract was expiring, and here's what happened. You saw the price of oil dropping like lead, pun intended, and it actually went to a negative number. So you're wondering, how is that possible? Right at this point, it was earlier in the day, it was only down 36%. So the price of West Texas crude, what we measure it in, not the Brent that the rest of the world does, was down to just a lonely $11. But it dropped all the way to a negative, literally a negative, almost a negative $40 during that trading day. And the way how that happened is a little bit of a conundrum, but it has to do with contango. We'll talk more about oil here in a second, but let me back up. The third week is when the options close, and that means that that whoever owns the oil at the close of trade, when those options close, has to take possession of it, which usually isn't a problem because the people who own it at that point actually do want to take possession, put it in a tanker or ship it to wherever it's going to be used. But unfortunately, sometimes people do something rather risky, which is in the stock world, it's called a naked short, where you sell something that you don't actually own. You sell a contract for 100 shares of something that you don't actually own, with the idea that you get out of it and make some money if it does in fact trade the wrong way. Well, this naked short is selling something that you don't own, therefore you must buy it in order to sell it. And this is the other side of that same type of trade, where you had people that had no ability to take possession of the oil, and in fact it cost them money if they were forced to take in charge of that oil in a few weeks. Literally, they have to take possession of it, and there's no place to store it at the point because the economy had slowed down. Okay, so a barrel of oil, 42 gallons. When it's processed, it becomes more than that because it's so dense. The fuel power is so dense that it goes about 20 gallons to gasoline, about 12 and 4, so jet fuel is real close to diesel. So you get another maybe 15, 16 that goes to diesel, and then you have other products. Just round numbers, the $60 a barrel oil for the crude, West Texas sweet crude, translates to maybe $112 when it's finished and refined and sold at the pump. Sounds true? Okay. So let's talk about supply and demand. If a barrel of oil costs $60 a barrel, and I just arbitrarily drew in supply and demand here, but the world has been burning has now gotten to 100 million barrels a day. So 100 million barrels a day times 60 is approximately $2.2 trillion in a year, with a global GDP of approximately 100 trillion. That's about 2.2% of the world's GDP. However, when it's refined into finished product, that's more like 4 trillion or 4% of the world's GDP. Now here's what happens when there's a massive demand shock, like the pandemic shut down the world's economies around the nation, around the world and around the nation. Then demand made a monster shift to the left. And that would leave you, if supply stayed the same, at about $10 a barrel, which probably only Saudi Arabia can produce at that, no profits, but can produce variable cost of $10 a barrel. The rest of the world pretty much is 20 to 30, 30 for the shale plays maybe, is their cost of production, leaving no economic profit. Now, the economic profit goes to these countries like Russia and Saudi. Saudi is budgeted at $80 a barrel, for example, so that they can maintain their profitability. That drops it, notice that drops it down to 0.3, 0.4 trillion, or approximately the same percentage of the world's economy, because of the massive and monster hit to price and a 30% reduction in quantity. Okay, well then Saudi and Russia got into a bit of a tiff, and Saudi kept producing, so literally $10 a barrel is where oil was headed if everybody did not cut back. And the idea behind a monopoly, which if everybody prices as a monopoly, that's the best price possible, then that means that the group, the consortium, the co-op has to reduce their prices to keep prices up. Nobody does that. OPEC notoriously likes to cheat, and Russia, of course, is not a formal member of OPEC, but one of the biggest exporters in the world. Okay, so what happens if supply then adjusts? Then you could end up with something that looks like this, maybe an equilibrium of $35 a barrel if supply reduced somewhat, but not a tremendous amount. That takes it only to about $0.9 trillion retail, wholesale, and therefore probably about 1% of global GDP. Now, equilibrium is probably $30 a barrel. If you didn't have big oligopoly, if you didn't have price fixing, if you didn't have quantity production fixing, then you should expect the price of oil to be maybe $30, $35 a barrel. But on the other hand side, here's the demand side. Some countries have seen clean air for the first time in their lives. And the story just goes on, pictures before and after. Now, maybe they were a little selective in the choices of what pictures they use, but when the economy comes to stop and the cars stop driving and the power starts reducing dramatically, then you end up with a massive reduction in the view of what people have in terms of pollution. And the story goes on everywhere, but here's Beijing, where people have for the first time been able to breathe fresh air. Now, let's look at this. Non-sustainable. If you're looking from here to there, things that are non-sustainable will not go on indefinitely. Coal is almost gone in the UK. It's dropped from 40% of the US production to down to less than, probably 20% in 10 years. Coal is going away fast for lots of reasons, but so is oil, and it turns out that natural gas isn't quite as clean and impact free as most people thought, in part because of the methane involved. If it's not burned, like it's vented, then it's a wicked greenhouse gas. So you have the human and economic pain of the COVID shutdown, which is just really amazing. But suddenly and magically, the earth gets a little breather, a little bit of fresh air, and the use of oil and other fossil fuels is down about 30%. And it won't come back. I think that people are going to go back to the offices like they used to now that it's proof positive that you can work from home and still be productive. I don't think people are going to go back to that. Flying to meetings is going to take a while to come back. Big cruise ships is going to take a while to come back. So I think people that think the economy is not changed forever, I think are wrong. We'll see. We'll see. But going straight back to where it was, probably not going to happen. The malls that were going out of business anyhow, the big department stores, just gave a monster boost to Amazon and a kick in the butt to those that can't handle the online combination. Pollution down about 17%. Wow. Back to the 2006 levels. So this is tragically and magically the opportunity to move toward zero carbon footprint and off of oil. And that may well happen. We'll see. But the cost of oil is higher than most people think. So the cost of oil is massively more than we pay at the pump. A 2005 study said that it was probably $250 a barrel back then. A study during the Gulf Wars said that the price, you figure in the cost of going to war for oil, the Gulf Wars, is maybe $900 a barrel. And neither of those studies counted the cost of the carbon emissions and the greenhouse gas impact. The health impacts are massive. So you have maybe 10,000 people die in mines per year. Most of those are in coal mines, but other types of mines. And then you have millions of people that have health impact from smog. Millions of people die from complications each year associated with pollution, air pollution, but of course other pollutions associated with primarily coal. So the climate change impacts are harder to identify, but basically the climate scientists say we need to get off of coal, oil, and gas sooner, not later, aiming for a major reduction within 10 years and essentially being completely off or carbon neutral by 2050. That's 30 years from now, or 40 years from now. Well, this is a way to look at it, but getting from here to there is a important way to look at the future. If you know that coal, oil, and natural gas are going to be going away, then first off, don't invest in that economy that is a built economy that's in a non-sustainable and dying industry. Don't put your investments there. You never know. It may be a trade, but certainly not. And you can expect, going back, you can expect that the true price of oil would be $35 a barrel. And you can expect that countries would start to put taxes on it, resulting in the price being higher and government just reaping the benefit. So the governments could take a $25 a barrel tax, leaving the price at $35 to the producers, and we'd end up with something that looks like this. So you'd say, well, okay, no taxes. Well, there's several plans that say, okay, just give the taxes back to people. If they still want to buy oil at a higher price or gas, then feel free to do so, but you can use it for other things as well. So there's lots of ways. The tax on oil is not as cheap as we're paying, $60 a barrel. It really should be much more, maybe 100, maybe 150 if you start to figure real costs. And we should start to wean ourselves off of it instead of keeping to move and stay on it. Anyway, good luck with it. And again, thinking about getting from here to there, you should try to get from here to there and look at the future. The conundrum of oil is one that you probably won't see again in your lifetime, but the cost of oil is something that we all are now starting to see as we look at clear skies around us as we all come out of the lockdown. This is Elmer Hall from Strategic Business Planning Company. We make the plans that every business needs.